My great-grandfather, actually his family were farmers in Hitchin for generations, and he didn't get on with his dad for some reason, I don't know why. And he decided to become a miller. So he used to grow the wheat, and then he decided to mill the wheat into flour. And that was in 1867. He came here and worked with the owner then, and then ended up buying the mill. So I run the flour milling business now at Wright, have done for the last 30 years. It's a bit of a tradition, family tradition, because I'm the 5th generation to be a miller. I love it. Be able to get wheat and make it into flour and sell it to the bakers to make bread.
Well, he's my only son, and my daughters all had other careers, and he always wanted to be a miller. And he has a son, James, and he's very happy being a miller. I think it's commendable. It's wonderful that there's always somebody, and each person has been so good for the time they were running the mill. G.R. Wright, then Uncle Walter, who, it was in a very difficult time. He was managing director, and he kept putting money into the mill, to keep it going. So many mills went out of business at that time, in the 20s. And then my father-in-law was very good. He built new silos. And then my husband was extremely good. And David is far better than any of them.
Well, the house was built in 1725, so it's a Queen Anne house. And it's been owned by lots of people over the years. It was first lived in by my ancestors in 1867, for George Wright moved in there with his wife Matilda and his family, his children, and they grew up there like I grew up there.
We lived in Hoddesdon before, and there was a relation living in this house, and my husband was taking over the mill, and he couldn't very well turn her out, so we had to find somewhere nice for her to live. And when we then moved in, and it was in pretty bad state, so we had to start at the top, the attic, and work our way down. When we came with our 4 children, it was all one house. And then when my children grew up and married and went away, David got married, and so we chopped a bit off. So David's house is that behind this wall. So we chopped this off, and so that he had a house near to the mill.
I've been employed here for 40 years. I did 40 years last month. But I think that actually I worked in the business well before that, because when I was a child, I used to come and work in the mill, cleaning up and that sort of thing, in my school holidays to earn pocket money. There were rules and regulations about employing children into the factory, but because I was the boss's son, I was allowed to do it because he knew I wouldn't sue him if I had an accident.
No, I never worked in the mill. No. I looked after the managing director. That was my job. Quite often, the men who worked in the mill, their sons came and worked in the mill. Or, yes, this happens quite a bit. My daughter, when she was at university or something, but in her holidays, she used to work on reception, just to earn some money. And David, when he was a little boy, he used to get 6 an hour for sweeping up the yard. He was very well behaved, really. Yes, he was. It was no problem.
This was like a playground for me when I was growing up. My sister, who's a twin sister to me, we used to play in the mill. I don't think my father ever knew that we were doing it, but we would go in there and the men would be packing the bags, the sacks of flour, and we would sit on the sacks on the conveyors going out the door, and the driver would put us to one side and then pick the sack up and put it on the lorry. And we were quite, I don't think we helped very much in those days, but it was good fun.
I was born in April the 30th, 1929, which makes me 93. I was 10 when the war started, so that's what I remember most. The bombs dropping, and I don't think I was ever afraid. I always knew I'd got to go to school the next day. But when the bombs were dropping, my brother and I used to get under the dining room table, which was very strong. After they dropped all the bombs around us, we would go around looking for shrapnel, and I remember doing that. We would go off for the day, a long way on our bicycles and with my friends, and I'd be about 12, and my mother and their mothers never worried about it. Long as they were home before it was dark, Take our sandwiches with us. Times have changed. We just didn't worry so much. I lived on the lower road, and a bomb dropped on one of the bungalows, and my father was there as soon as possible to help to get the people out. And he got the wife out, and she said, "Don't worry about Reggie, get my dogs out."
I was playing the piano, I think, upstairs, and literally, boom, a big bang went, and Mum came into the room and she said, "Hi, that's a bomb." No doubt about it, I remember that from the war. And it was an IRA bomb they put by the gasworks.
Oh.
And that evening, I was only probably about 10 or 11, something like that. My father and I walked round the yard with torches looking under the lorries to see if there were any bombs, which I thought then was very exciting, but I think now was a bit daft. During the Second World War, there was a lot of activity with the enemy pilots trying to bomb the mills in the docklands of London, but also here. And so a lot of bombs that were dropped around this site. We had the air raid shelter. Remember I showed you the air raid shelter? I remember going in there when I was a little kid, and it was obviously in the 60s, so it was long gone after the war. But we went in there and there were old bunk beds and steel helmets and all the things that you would see during that time.
On VE Day, when the war ended, I was 16, and we went into Ware, and we danced in the road, and there was music, and it was wonderful. We'd been in blackout for 5 years, and all the lights were on in the town. There's lights, and there was a band playing, and lots of American soldiers and RAF from Hunstanton, and we were all dancing, having a lovely time, First time everywhere was lit up. Yes. Mrs. Wright, that was Matilda, sort of in the Victorian times. She had a cow most probably in the War Garden, and she'd milk and this was the dairy, and she would make cream and butter, and then she would sell the separated milk at a little window. When you came in, you could see it, to any people in the village very cheaply, where now we all drink separated milk, don't we, because it's healthy. But she would make butter for the house and cream for the house here. Yeah, in this room was the dairy.
The post that we used to tie the barges up to, which is now just sitting in almost the middle of the yard, and there's the old mill building, which some parts of it go back to 1650. You can see all the oak timbers, and a lot of that was from the ships that were made during the time of the Spanish Armada. The old 1947 Bedford O lorry, which we used to deliver the flour to, is still with us. The old millstones that are on show now that we used to use to grind the wheat. I remember those coming out of the mill in the 1960s when I was a kid. There's lots of history.
People have seen a girl looking out of the window in the attic, in the offices, and I've never seen it, but people have seen it, haven't they? But I think I rather think there are not ghosts, but presence of people. I often think this is a very old house, so a lot of people have lived in this, but I often think there's a presence about. Not they would hurt. They were nice. They're a nice presence, I feel sometimes there is somebody. I see something moving, and then I look and no. But I just, it's the ghost. Doesn't worry me at all. I think they're friendly. Yeah. My husband made me a director and a shareholder. My husband was wanting to build onto this mill, make it bigger. And we were all in the directors' meeting. And some of the directors said, we couldn't afford it, and it's going to cost a lot of money. And I had a vote. And also my mother-in-law had a vote, but she wasn't there, so I had her vote. And so I voted against it. And so it went. When we got home, my husband said, "Don't you ever do that again and vote against what I said in the bill." So they had another meeting and I voted for it and it went through. Every year we'd have a mill party with everybody who worked here, and their wives or partners would come, and we had it in the billiard room up here, didn't we? I think living at the mill is like a centre point where people all come to the mill. It's a place of meeting.
Well, the area's become much more built up. So where you see the factories to the south of here was all fields once upon a time, all the way down to Hackney Marshes. You could see from the mill all the way through, no buildings were there. Now, over time, it's become an industrial estate and lots of buildings have gone up for factories. For the last 200 years, the machinery is quite similar that makes flour. And now everything it looks similar, but it's got all the kind of electronics and computers attached to it. But the principles of milling haven't really changed for 200 years. But I always say that if my great-great-grandfather came back to life and he walked into a modern mill now, he'd still know what was going on. But I think he might be a bit amazed at how it works. Going back to 1789, when the mill collapsed under the weight of the grain, that there was one person left in the mill, and he died. He got crushed. That was in 1789.
I do remember we had a fire. One of the silos, was it, burnt down, and in the middle of the night, and somebody came knocking on our front door, and they said, "Your mill's on fire." And Ken, my husband, he jumped out of bed and put his trousers on, and then put his shoes on, and then he couldn't. No, the other way round. He put his shoes on first, and then he couldn't get his trousers. But anyway, we rang the fire brigade, and they came down and they put it out.
All the mills that ran along the Lee, from really Dicker Mill, there's Ware Mill, there was a mill in Waltham Abbey, there was a mill here. They all relied on the river for their power, first of all, but also for deliveries. So canal boats used to take wheat from the London docks up to the mills, and sometimes they used canal boats to deliver flour further along the river. But because all the mills relied on the water as a source of power, there was always this problem with mills further upstream trying to block the river, and that would stop the power. We don't have that problem anymore. All us millers get on, but there are very few of us now. So probably 2,000 mills in about 1867, when my great-great-grandfather started. Now there's less than a handful of companies, really.
Yes, I'm a gardener, so I've got the wall garden to look after, and all the gardens around the mill, and my garden too. So I'm pretty busy. I do love living here, yes I do. I know even when we were locked in, there's people walking by and always wave to me, and I know I don't feel at all lonely here, you know.
I will keep going until I die, probably. I don't retire, because unless I can't do it anymore.